Let's just do it.
Let's do this.
I've got the industrial look going here, so
Right.
like just so everybody knows, just like how like unplanned this was. You know how how much it you know, it just kind of make it look like we were just really scrambling to
I set my background up as a mess for that. You know, your long cords everywhere.
I like the idea that your background was staged just for this podcast.
Yes, to make it look as though we're scrambling and to try to figure this out. Like,
we're so unprepared for this.
It's going to be really clean the next time, you know, because I'll be more prepared.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Man, Captain Redbeard, AJ Gardner's already here. I'm hoping that we get a good number of people to come in and show up. Here's the thing. So real quick, just a quick sign on, real quick, I suppose. William Tecumseh McCarthy, commander of the Superflex Army, is in the house. I'm SFD, coming to you from Superflex City. And William, we got trouble, my friend. Trouble right here in Superflex City. Trouble starts with Alvin Kamara, starts with a K that rhymes with A, and that stands for shit.
Yes,
I could do that. I love the music, man, so I could do that whole song if I really wanted to. But
please do.
But like, I wonder if we would be here talking if he only scored 5 touchdowns.
I wonder. So only like 49 points or something like that.
Yeah, seriously. Like that, I don't know if it would feel quite as daunting if Minnesota had been able to tackle him at the goal line. I mean, one time, just try it, just see how it feels. And you know, maybe like, but the problem is, I think that there are a lot of people right now just kind of accepting their fate, just kind of giving up on this fantasy championship week after one NFL game, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not meant to be, you know, condescending or anything. Like, it makes sense if that feels like you got a mountain to climb all of a sudden, you know?
Yeah, it's disappointing. You know, you work so hard all season long to get to this point, and then you're already like, you know, in the coffin. And it's just like you hear the dirt getting sprinkled on top and you're not even gone yet. It's just like,
yeah,
what in the, you know, this sucks. This whole long season, and I've already just been destroyed. And
yeah.
Yeah, it's just
honestly, like, I mean, just kind of an objectively like fucked up season.
Yeah, I mean, it truly
survived it, got to the championship, and then they play one game, and you're just kind of done now. It
sucks.
That's how it feels.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say I think I'm in 6 championships, and like that's out of 20 leagues. So
yeah.
You know, it's like one of them is it's a guillotine league. So, you know, I made it to the final 2, but it's really hard to use that one as context, just because, I mean, I've got basically the entire player pool available to me to help recover from Kamara.
Right.
But that's the only one where I'm playing against Kamara. And then I've got one where I started Kamara. And is, you know, so I think that I'd say I'm pretty lucky in that regard, that I mostly avoided him everywhere. But you know, it's still like I still, that one league, even though it's a guillotine league, that still feels like that's going to be really hard to overcome.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, everything has to go right now, right? Like every week you always have players that you go, okay, he had a bad week, but I have other guys that can kind of suck it up. But if you're in the situation where you're going up against him, you literally have to run perfect the rest of the week.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, honestly, maybe even a little more than perfect. You've got to take some shots, you've got to take some home run swings, and you've got to connect.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a whole lot of room for error. I don't think that it does any good for us to sit here and say, oh no, it's fine. We got them right where we want them. That's
denial is one of the stages, right?
Yeah, that's obviously not the case. Obviously, there's some work to be done here. I think that the first thing though that we did want to impress upon people is this: no, this isn't over. There's still ways to get this done. I think it's not going to be easy. You are going to have to really thread the needle. But like I said, I mean, I think that too many people are, just readily giving up on this, and I don't. I don't know. It just feels. It's not something I could do.
I mean, you just got to put work into it, right? Like, I mean, this is when you really have to look into everything, and you have to look at matchups. You have to look at your teams. You have to look at, if you have don't have a trade deadline, do you make a move? I mean, look at everything you can. Grab to upgrade positions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, it's daunting for sure, and it's kind of heartbreaking in a way or spirit breaking, but it just means you got to put work into it. You've done it for the last 14, 15 weeks, or in Dynasty all of the weeks, and why not? I mean, why not just do it one more week? I don't really get that. But I also understand where it's just like, oh my God, such a huge hill to climb. Like I was telling you in a chat, there's one league where a guy's had 4 players go and he has 128 points already. Like, if you're the other team, like, you already feel like the week's over. But there's 2 ways to react to it, right? And we're not going to talk about the giving up in one. We got to figure out how to recover from that.
Yeah. Yeah. So our friend AJ said, points out it's easy to give up, but you got to play the upside and try to catch up. If you got to the title, ... it's first of all, it's really hard to get there. It's so hard to get to that championship game, to give up before you've even had a player play yet.
Yeah.
It's like, again, it's going to be really tough to get back there again. So like, this is kind of your chance, you stick with it. And beyond that, I guarantee you there's going to be some stories that come out of this. There's going to be some, I played against Kamara and I still won the championship. There's going to be some of those, and there's going to be some, I started Kamara, thought that I had that thing won, and I still ended up losing. Like, there's going to be some bad beats like that too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that'll be me.
That's kind of how I'm feeling too. I'm like, that one league where I've got Kamara, I'm just like, I'm going up against Derrick Henry and David Montgomery and Calvin Ridley. Like, that's kind of what we're looking for. And we'll get right into this here in just a second. Just let me just finish dragging out the preface, because that's what I do. But I think that we can look for some guys who you might have on your roster that represent that upside that we're talking about and that we're looking for. I think that you can, if you don't have a trade deadline, if you still have the ability to trade, I know that I've already gotten some questions about some potential trades that represent that upside to try and catch up. And then, I mean, like, we could even, it's obviously extremely hard to, to win the lotto and find guys on waivers who are going to help you. But like there are those, it happens, it happens just about every week. So, I think that we could look at some guys who might be available on waivers who are in really good matchups. We'll dig as deep as we can to help find that upside. And again, it's like it's not going to be hard. I mean, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take the perfect combination of guys. But I just think that combination is out there. While we're here, we can also answer any start sit questions you have. Feel free to put them in the chat. Whether you're thank you if you're joining, and if you're watching on YouTube, watching on Periscope, you got any start sit questions, let us have them. And, we'll even just kind of stop where we're at, do some quick start sits, and then get back into the Kamara focused conversation. But let's start there. I mean, we can just talk about, you just kind of set, you were projected to win going up against that Kamara team. So you set a fairly safe lineup. Like all of a sudden, you find yourself in a 60-point hole, and, but you've got some guys on the bench who can represent some upside. I mean, does anybody come to mind for you as some guys who, very well could be on some benches? They were, borderline start type of guys. That makes some sense for you to, now you take out a safer guy. And maybe that might even be a question. Who are some of those safe guys that you potentially take out of your lineup for a higher upside guy who might be on your bench?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I do is kind of like, this week's weird because we have 4 days of games. So like a kind of, you almost have to set lineups on the daily, but you're also looking at, are the players, questionable, on Sunday? Do you have to start somebody on Saturday because you don't want to end up on Sunday and there's players that don't go? Well, maybe now you're a little less worried about that. You want to pick the best guy that can score the most points. So you're not going to quite be as safe and pick somebody who's maybe slightly lesser on, on Saturday than the guy who's questionable on Sunday. I mean, that's one of the things that, like, I think I loosen up my conservatism, I guess. And, but as for you asked who are some players that like I would maybe take out of my lineup. I mean, a guy like, oh my gosh, Damian Harris, somebody like that. You see him getting like 11 carries for 50 yards and maybe 1 target. Like, that's a guy that maybe I take out if he's in a flex and put in like maybe an MVS or something like that, where like he's somebody who's hot or cold. Or maybe you have Chase Claypool, like, who blew up earlier in the year, but you're not quite as confident playing him now, just because he hasn't really shown that recently. Mm-hmm. But he has that ceiling, so he's somebody that I might consider putting in that if he's not in there right now.
I've got a couple for you, and I wonder if these are too bold. I mean, to me, these are no-brainer moves personally. But I am curious. So, first of all, 2 guys that I would consider benching. First of all, Jonathan Taylor going up against Pittsburgh. They're the 3rd best defense at stopping running backs from scoring fantasy points. So, I mean, and Jonathan Taylor's been great for several games in a row now. But how much upside is there really going against Pittsburgh? And what makes it even tougher is the fact that we just saw Gio Bernard get, how many, he get 2-3 touchdowns?
Yeah, 2 touchdowns
on Monday night. So, so we know that there's a path, but is that enough upside? 2 touchdowns without yardage, is that enough upside to overcome what Alvin Kamara just did? So that's part of what you have to weigh. And then another guy, And you're gonna hate this one, but DeAndre Swift has a very tough matchup with Tampa Bay today as well. So, or this weekend. So, those are two guys that that's where you can kind of find those margins. Is you look at those guys who seem safe, but you say, all right, safe doesn't do it for me this week. That's the type of thing that that's I don't have the luxury of safe anymore. Like, if I was like Jonathan Taylor is to me, and DeAndre Swift, that's kind of just that's to start your studs. I don't give a fuck anymore. I'm not. I like whatever happens. At least I get second place money. Like that's what that is to me.
Yeah, I see that. I agree that they don't have the ceiling that we want. The issue I think that you run into is like, who do you have that you're starting over those guys typically, right? Like, I mean, you might have one, like, let's say you have both of those guys. You might have one guy that you go, okay, I like this guy's ceiling better, but you're not going to have both. And so you're going to be stuck kind of with some of those guys. Like, I mean, are you starting Ito Smith over those guys? You know what I mean? Just because the coach says that he's their main guy now. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like that's something I'm not sold on. But I think that's a challenge, especially in like a no trade, if you have a trade deadline, and the lack of movement you can make at the moment. Like, I mean, what are your other options realistically on like a 25-man or 28-man roster?
Totally. Yeah, that's a big part of it. But I mean, here, let me throw some names at you though. And because I mean, these are guys with upside to me. These are guys that you could realistically have on your roster, have on your bench. You were planning on starting Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift. Here's some guys that you could have. And I'm just curious if anyone, if any of these are plays you would actually make. First of all, it's Leonard Fournette. Picking on your Lions again. But I mean, they're the worst defense against running backs.
Actually, I was talking to one of my buddies, just texted me because he's like, hey, before we get this going, before the day starts, I need to ask you a few questions. And then he gave me a list of 4 running backs. It was Fournette, Dobbins, Swift, and Pollard. And Pollard's like a late game tomorrow. And I was like, well, if Zeke doesn't play, he'd be ideal. Yeah. But if he plays, then the ceiling's capped. And I said Dobbins and Fournette. And so, yeah, I agree. Like your Swift comment, like I like Fournette better than Swift this week, no question.
Yeah, I think if I had the luxury of safety, I think I would stick with Swift personally. I still think that he's got I think he has a higher floor.
Yeah, this was standard also, so that's another.
That helps too. Yeah, that changes things a little too. Sure. But even then, I mean, Fournette has really kind of been the pass catcher there. Ronald Jones still struggles with that. So even when Ronald Jones is healthy, like Fournette's kind of been their passing downs back. But now that he's kind of their feature back with Ronald Jones out, it presents more opportunity for Leonard Fournette, especially in particularly in PPR. But like the tough part with him is, there's still a little bit of a committee approach, with McCoy and possibly Keyshawn Vaughn. So, the workload is not guaranteed for Fournette the way it kind of is for DeAndre Swift. So that's where I say, for me, Swift has a higher floor, and like in a vacuum, that's who I would have preferred. But now that we're chasing points, now that we need, 20 plus point upside from, basically 4 guys to catch up to, what Kamara and, one other player is going to be able to do. To me, Fournette is, one of those guys that I just vault ahead of both Swift and Jonathan Taylor.
I buy that. Like, that's definitely a guy that you probably haven't been starting the last few months,
Yeah.
So, like,
so,
I mean, yeah, for sure.
Number 2, how about Gio Bernard going against the second worst defense? Houston is stopping running backs. We just saw him again. I mean, is scary as Jonathan Taylor's matchup looks against Pittsburgh. Gio he just scored multiple touchdowns, and that's kind of what we're looking for. Like, here's the thing. Here's the thing to keep in mind is we're not trying to eat the whole horse.
Exactly.
There isn't one guy who's going to outscore Alvin Kamara this week. It's not going to happen. At this point, we're just kind of trying to piece it together in the aggregate. We want it to be as few guys as possible. So, we're looking for multiple upside plays. But I mean, if you get 2 touchdowns from Gio and another 2 from Leonard Fournette, and then, the combined yardage between the two, you're more than halfway already to Kamara. You only need one other player who's going to get you, who's going to go over 100 yards and get a touchdown essentially, and you're caught up. So, like, that's the thing. Like, that's how easy this could, quote unquote easy. Like this that's how doable.
It's how realistic it could be. Like,
yeah.
I mean, you really only have to catch up about 4 points a player, right? Like, that's kind of the way maybe, and your players just need to outperform by that. So, like, I mean, that's a touchdown for each guy. So you just got to run good that way too. So I wouldn't like get too super aggressive, I mean, but yeah, you can make those little moves to gain points here and there, and maybe not just do like going back to the start your studs kind of thing. Like, really start taking a look at these matchups. Don't just go by the MFL like positional rankings or the pass defense and rush defense kind of thing, like where there's those columns for that when you set your lineup. Really dig in and see maybe, okay, their pass defense is good, but they're really bad at defending the slot, so maybe you grab the slot receiver in that game as opposed to just blanket statementing their pass defense is bad, because those are the ways that you can kind of lose points by not getting a little bit more, thorough in your evaluation on these matchups. So I know there's people out there that provide that data for free. So it's just a matter of looking it up. And, I think that's just one more little edge you can give yourself that maybe you don't typically.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a couple more guys for you. This and we're kind of getting more risky as we go here, but start with Antonio Gibson. If he plays, like, that's the only real trick with him. I think most people are probably starting him anyways, but I think, at least to me, like, you worry a little bit less about his availability and more about like the upside if he does play. That kind of becomes the focus.
Yep.
Is that a move that you're willing to make? Again, just focusing on Swift and on Taylor, even though, there are other guys that we could throw into that category. I mean, Josh Jacobs has a bad matchup with Miami. Chris Carson has a tough matchup with the Rams. Mike Davis has a tough one with Washington, Kenyon Drake with San Francisco. So, there's some bad matchups out there. But, to me, like, focusing on those guys that felt like stone cold locks, before Kamara did what he did. And now it becomes, shoot the moon time. Like, these are like desperation type of moves. So, I like, it's a tough sell for me to say, bench Jonathan Taylor and put in Antonio Gibson and hope that he plays, and if he doesn't, then, you take a 0, but that was still the right move. Like, I mean, but do you subscribe to that, I guess? Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that most of the lineups, you're looking at making these replacements in your flex, right? So, I
Mhm.
mean, it's not even going to be as difficult as like you're making it out to sound, I don't think. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah.
most of the time you're not going to have like, I mean, most teams don't have Jonathan Taylor as their second flex or something like that. So, like 100%, I'm putting in Gibson. I mean, it's just one of those things you have to roll the dice on him being out there because his ceiling is so high. I'm in a toilet bowl that just accumulates through the weeks 14 through 16, and I'm like 30 some points back. So, like, that's almost the Kamara situation. You know what I mean? And it's like I'm going up against that deficit already. So,
Mhm.
it's like, you know, you got to get aggressive. And so I have Gibson, and I don't know if he's going to play, but I got to throw him in there just because he's better than me throwing in, like, I don't know. I don't even know who's on that team, honestly, but like, you know, I'm not going to like Alan Lazard or something like that, who's, you know, has promise, but like, I'm not sure he has that ceiling in any way. So,
Mhm.
I, yeah, I mean, 100%. That's where you got to get aggressive. Like we were talking in the Superflex City chat, and Har brought up Kittle. Like he's another guy. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we're not certain, but he is off the IR now, and so if they play him, he's gonna smash because that's what he does. And
Mhm.
he's one of the few guys I'm not afraid to start. You know, the first week coming back from injury. So, like those are the kind of guys you just got to get aggressive with and hope they hit. And
Yeah,
but
hope they play.
yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got two things you have to hope, but you know, it's a risk. It's a, you know, measured risk, I think, and I think you got to take it.
Yeah. Let me let me give you the list again of guys at the running back position at least. And you know, we can talk a little bit about wide receiver. There's probably not a lot to say at tight end. Like you said, I mean, Kittle is kind of the one guy who represents, you know, zero floor and all the ceiling in the world, just depending on if he plays. So, you know, there's not a whole lot to do necessarily at tight end. I mean, like at tight end, if you don't have Kelsey, Darren Waller, or, you know, in my opinion, Logan Thomas, I mean, you're just hoping for touchdowns anyways. So,
Yep.
you know, it's the same process at tight end.
And the one thing, the Jets are really bad this year at facing tight ends. So
Mhm.
they're kind of the Arizona of Cardinals from last year. So Cleveland plays them. So maybe Hooper is a
Oh, there
play.
you go.
So I think that's maybe one more to add.
Yeah. So he might be kind of like you throw him into the wide receiver mix. Like if you've got a bad matchup at wide receiver and you know you like maybe you already have a good tight end. You've got Kelsey, you've got Waller, you've got Logan Thomas, you've got Robert Tonyan. You know, you've got one of those guys who is just kind of a must start at tight end already. But like you're looking for a flex. And, you know, you've got kind of some bad matchups at wide receiver. You know, maybe you can move some stuff around and get Hooper in at flex. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the type of guy that we should kind of focus on. Maybe guys who are on your bench a little bit more, guys that maybe you could even find on waivers in those shallower leagues. Like in a deep dynasty, it gets really tough. You know, Freddie Swain kind of comes to mind as like
Yeah,
a
he's a hot or
sleeper.
cold kind of guy. He scores
Yeah.
a decent amount of touchdowns for the amount of targets he gets.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. To me, like Tim Patrick is kind of in that conversation as well. Um, and I mean, I don't even know if those guys would be available on waivers and, you know, depending on the size of the league, but let me just give you the list real quick. I'm kind of bouncing around here because there's so many thoughts when it comes to
Yeah,
this.
we're unprepared, so let's just
Yeah,
it's the amoeba defense.
yeah, exactly. We're definitely shooting from the hip on this, but let me give you the list of running backs that, you know, to me, like they concern me because it feels like the upside is kind of capped. And we're really kind of getting into the second tier of running backs. There's that safe group: Derrick Henry, David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, Miles Sanders, Nick Chubb. I'm not touching those guys. I'm leaving them in. But when you get to Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, Chris Carson, Mike Davis, Kenyon Drake, even Le'Veon Bell taking over as a starter in Kansas City going against Atlanta. So here's the thing, like that matchup is not good on paper. We've seen running backs, perform well against Atlanta, but the big thing is that it's like short yardage stuff, and Kansas City's going to get you in that position. Like Le'Veon Bell is entirely he's capable of scoring 2 or 3 touchdowns against Atlanta, but they're all going to be short yardage. And so I like, it's still like, to me, I still want the type of upside that comes with yardage, not just 3 touchdowns. Like, we also have to make up for 155 yards, 172 all-purpose yards from Alvin Kamara, by the way. So 3 touchdowns for totaling like 26 yards rushing, that doesn't do nearly as much for us with Lev Bell. And to me, like his floor is very, very low yardage. So he's still a guy that I'm considering taking out. So I want to throw some names at you of some guys, and I'm just curious, like, are there any of those guys that I named? Again, so Swift, Taylor, Carson, Mike Davis, Kenyon Drake, Le'Veon Bell, any of those guys that you would bench going up against Kamara in favor of some of these guys, some super deep guys? LaShawn McCoy and Keyshawn Vaughn are 2 that I'm particularly interested in. Mention Leonard Fournette, and that same matchup, great matchup with Detroit. What if Leonard Fournette doesn't end up being the feature guy? What if they go with a hot hand approach and it ends up being, Keyshawn Vaughn, to me, has looked the part all season long in those few opportunities that he's actually got. Like, that's a shoot the moon play, but is that too much for you?
I mean, so we're, yeah, I mean, he may be. I think the issue is, like, we just don't know, like, how much Brady trusts him. We have 3 backs that we have to be concerned about. So I think, like, what's the percentages of him being the go-to guy today? I would say it's probably like less than 20%.
Yeah.
So then we got to go, okay, if he is the go-to guy, what's his ceiling? Whereas these other guys we know are the go-to guys. So, like, and if they pop one run, you know what I mean? That's going to be like higher than, I think, once you take in that percentage of Vaughn being the actual guy. I just think that the play is still there. I do like thinking about Vaughn, though. I think that's something that you got to consider. Like, and I think maybe going back to, like, what I said earlier, I just don't think that he's the guy that I would consider, that last flex or something like that. That's kind of where I'm looking at replacing these guys. So maybe Vaughn's a guy that you put in if you have, like, Golden Tate or something as your last flex or something like that, because he's going to have a substantially higher ceiling. But I think that's definitely rolling the dice, and I think that's super risky. I don't think I would be able to do that in comparison to those guys that you listed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably fair. What about somebody like, we'll go a little bit farther down. Let's say James Robinson ends up playing. We know that he's not going to be 100% if he does play. Tough matchup with Chicago. Like, is that somebody that you would consider benching for somebody like Keyshawn Vaughn?
God, that's a and this is where the challenge comes in, right? Because like we're gonna keep going further and further down, and I'm gonna keep saying no, and like then at some point it's like, well, what are you doing? Like, because James Robinson, I think if they play him, he's got to be healthy enough. Like that's kind of my thought, but he's. Did I say James Robinson? I meant if that's not what I said, but yeah, that's so tough because like. See, I would think like whoever's going to be the backup to him is somebody that I would consider maybe more just because like than Vaughn, because I'm not 100, like I'm just not sold on Vaughn being the guy, right? Like from what we've seen. And so maybe that's my challenge or the hurdle I have to get over. But man,
I know.
It's just a tough one. I think you have to play James Robinson if he's playing. He's been way too consistent and against good defenses in the past. So he's just a tough one to not play, I think.
Yeah, he is. I'm just like I'm sometimes with when I'm setting my lineup, I'm like Brett Favre a little bit, just like kind of a gunslinger mentality.
Sure. No, I dig it.
Like, especially going against, a day like what Alvin Kamara just had. I'm just like, man, like consistency does nothing for me. And I mean,
he's like a top 10 guy consistent,
right?
You know what I'm saying? So that's a little different. It's not like, I don't know, like a mediocre running back. You know what I mean? So.
Right. Well, and not only that, I mean, to your point, the whole thing with Keyshawn Vaughn is abstract. Like there's a lot of what ifs.
Yeah.
And there's a few guys like that, like Boston Scott, I think is in that conversation. Samaje Perine is in that conversation. Like there's a lot of what ifs. A lot of things have to go right. But, it like that's kind of what it takes to overcome Kamara. Like a lot of things are going to have to go right. Status quo is not good enough. That's not going to get it done. So like, I mean, a lot of things had to go right for Kamara to get 6 touchdowns. That happened though. So, your opponent already got that. They already got the best case scenario that everything went right. Like the what ifs actually came to fruition for them. So now we need that. And that's kind of what Keyshawn Vaughn represents. Like, what if Leonard Fournette's ineffective? They put in Keyshawn Vaughn, and he's just eating up yards, and they just stick with him.
I so hope that he ends up being the guy. That'd be wonderful for this conversation.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, fantasy Twitter would hate it.
Oh, I know. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, it would make for a fun day. But kind of same thing with Boston Scott, one of my all-time favorites, but like, Miles Sanders has to get out of the way somehow, because Boston Scott just does all of the same things that Miles Sanders does, just not quite as well. Like, right. He's faster, but he's smaller. And like everything else, Miles Sanders is, they're probably on even playing field at catching the ball, but Miles Sanders is just a more credible threat all the way around. So like what it would really kind of take is a Miles Sanders injury, and it would have to be, kind of early on. But like that's sometimes, to me, that's almost the type of move that you have to make. And I mean, I think that we're kind of coming to the conclusion that it's not quite that dire of straits.
Yeah, I mean, once I said it, like where you just have to go 4 points up, right? Like you just have to gain 4 points. You expected Kamara to get, let's say, 16. So now you're down to he's plus 40 compared to what expectations were. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you start 11 players, that's 4 points. So it's not that much per player. And so it can still be done. So once I kind of said that, it actually made me a little less worried, like, I mean, it's really just coming down to a couple guys that I don't want to go crazy and change my whole lineup with a bunch of ceiling plays. I'm still going to be playing the guys I'm comfortable with their matchups and, happy when I put them in the lineup at the beginning of the week.
Mhm.
It's just going to be those flex guys that I'm really going to be looking at and contemplating, do I want to put this ceiling guy in over this guy? And because there's enough variance there that you can overcome that difference. And that's a touchdown here. Every other guy scores a touchdown and every other guy gets an extra reception. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, or every guy gets an extra reception. And there you go. You just caught up. So it's doable. It's
Yeah.
it's just a huge mountain to climb.
Yeah. I mean, the tough part is, though, like, on top of, outscoring their projections, like, they still have to cover, your opponent's player at that position too.
For
So,
sure.
you have to outscore, your tight end has to outscore their tight end by basically 5 points,
Yeah.
So that's where it gets a little bit tougher, but I mean, that's not a huge amount of points.
Yeah, I mean, that's gonna be the case regardless, right? Like, you're just gonna, like, he just outscored you by so much that you're gonna have to do that.
Mhm.
And but yeah, like I said, I'm really just looking at my flex plays,
Yeah.
and making those changes. I don't think I'm gonna go like wholesale.
So if I was to go, deep into the bargain bin at wide receiver, there's probably not a lot of guys that I'm gonna necessarily sell you on, I don't think.
For me, probably not.
Yeah.
But I mean, possibly. Like, throw them at me. Let's see.
Well, so two guys that kind of come to mind for me, because first of all, so just back to the quarterback position for just a quick second, because, like, I really don't think that there's anything you can do at quarterback. I mean, if you've got a quarterback extreme strategy, and maybe you've got Deshaun Watson as your quarterback one, and it leaves Mitchell Trubisky on the bench. Man, I don't know if I can go through with
Oh, I'm
even
not. Like, I
saying
think
this.
Trubisky, like, he as good as much of a ceiling as we think he has. Last week he had a great matchup and scored 13 points. So,
Yeah.
like, I'm not super sold at, like, I mean, Watson's just been going crazy, like, for the most part. So I'm not taking him out, but
Yeah.
it's more like a Jalen Hurts conversation, right? Do you put him in?
Yeah.
And I think, like, he's the kind of player that I'm looking to plug in instead of obviously like a Phillip Rivers or an Andy Dalton or something like that. Like, but I think we're doing that anyway. So,
Yeah. Well, here's one real quick, and again, I mean, it's pretty unlikely that anyone actually has this dilemma. That's the thing. But, like, all week, I've been talking shit about Russell Wilson, because I'm so sick of the drop offs in the fantasy playoffs. But, like, what we've kind of come to realize is, it's not that he's just like a slam dunk must bench in the fantasy playoffs. He still has every bit the upside. He's just less likely to hit his ceiling in weeks 13 through 16 than he was in weeks 1 through 12. Like, those odds drop precipitously. And that's annoying, but, like, the fact that upside is still there. And he's got a tough matchup against the LA Rams. Josh Allen also has a tough matchup against the New England Patriots. Is that a move that you consider? Or is there enough? Is the juice worth the squeeze to bench Josh Allen for Russell Wilson? Like, is there enough upside with Russell Wilson and enough downside with Josh Allen going against New England to consider making that move?
Well, I think we have to look at the whole season. I think that, like, and I don't, like, if we look at what their baseline is, like, I don't think that the ceiling is that different between the two players. So like I'm not making any changes. Like if I'm playing Josh Allen before I went up against Kamara, I'm still gonna do the same thing. Like because I don't believe that the difference between those two quarterbacks is that great.
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of what I was driving at. I don't think, like, even when you've got an upside play like that, I still don't think that it's enough points to make a very big difference. So, like where I think that you can make up the margins is at running back and wide receiver specifically.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, we'll just jump back to wide receiver. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I want to get this published for anyone who didn't listen live. So there's a podcast out there to help give you something to consider when you're setting lineups. But so two guys that come to mind for me, because Jalen Hurts really kind of represents, that the type of upside that we're talking about. That's somebody who's been in people's lineups all week after finishing as the QB1 overall in week 15. Two guys that he's targeted quite a bit since being in. So first of all, his first touchdown pass as a starting quarterback went to Alshon Jeffrey. He's thrown 3 touchdown passes now to Greg Ward. Both of those guys, I think, are pretty low ownership. And going against Dallas, who is the worst defense at stopping wide receivers. So, these are guys that Jalen Hurts is looking for. These are guys who are going to be open because Dallas doesn't know how to stop them. And, these are guys that you could realistically be able to plug and play.
Yeah, I mean, those are guys you definitely have to consider. I also read something earlier where Deshaun Jackson might be back.
Oh, man.
And so if he's back, he's actually the guy I think I play over both of those. Just because he can hit those big plays, Yeah. But again, that's a late Sunday game. So do you want to, put those guys in over somebody else that's going to play? That's something I probably make that decision tomorrow when I see like what my players have done on Saturday. And that's the other thing, right? Like keep making decisions based on the results of the previous games, because the way this is set up, each game starting at a different time, so you can react after each game and just reevaluate those lineups, because maybe you do have somebody blow up and now you're going to change who you put in later on because all of a sudden you've caught up or something like that. So that's something. So I mean, the Deshaun Jackson's actually, if he might be a guy like, tomorrow, if I'm like uneasy about it, he's a guy I'm throwing in. You know what I mean? Like, because I think that his ceiling is so much higher. We see what he does on the first game. He comes back, it's usually good, and then he gets hurt by the third quarter. So hopefully he has a good first half. Another guy that kind of popped into my head for wide receiver is Justin Gage. I mean, he's a guy that not a lot of people probably. I mean, maybe they're starting him this week. I don't know, but they use him with, throwing passes and doing all this craziness. So he's the guy, that I would consider also maybe plugging in over somebody who's like, I might even consider playing him over like DJ Moore. Like,
yeah, DJ Moore. I'm trying to remember the matchup. It's not good. Washington. Yeah, they're the second best against wide receivers. So yeah, DJ Moore, first of all, is a good example of a guy that you consider benching. Terry McLaurin is another one in that same matchup that, I mean, first of all, Carolina's decent against wide receivers. Looks like the 8th best stopping wide receivers. Dwayne Haskins is getting the start, and McLaurin, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but McLaurin was definitely not as effective with Dwayne Haskins at quarterback. as he was with both Kyle Allen and Alex Smith. So
yeah, and he's doubtful. So
oh, there you go. If he's not even gonna play, then that makes it easy.
Yep, there you go.
But what about, I mean, Stephon Diggs going against Stephon Gilmore? Who I mean, I think that Gilmore's back. I think he's playing. But like, anyways, either way, it's still a tough matchup with New England. Calvin Ridley against Kansas City is a somewhat tough one, especially like you said. I mean, with Julio Jones out, like it it kind of shifts some tougher coverage over to Calvin Ridley. Maybe opens things up a little bit more for Russell Gage. Yeah,
I mean, those guys are a little less like. I mean, Ridley's just been destroying, so it's like one of those things. Like, I'd have a hard time getting him out of my lineup just because of that. Like, it's got to be a guy who's shown inconsistencies throughout the year, and the matchup's bad. Like, that's the tough one for me. I'm not any guy that's super like, super set up as the number one or something like that. I can't take him out just based on like the volume and that sort of thing and the opportunity. So. And that's what I'm looking for is the ceiling of opportunity, right? Like that's what we need, because you have to have that opportunity to perform. And so like those are the kind of guys I'm not going to sit, I don't think.
Okay. So maybe we go a little bit deeper for guys that you consider taking out of your lineup at this point, like Robbie Anderson, Tyler Lockett, Curtis Samuel, DJ Chark. Like those are guys, Sterling Shepard, like they all have tough matchups. And I mean, to me, like that's like the combination of, you have a tough matchup and I need a ton of points. I need a ton of upside. Like that combination of factors leads me to like, those are slam dunk, get them out of your lineup. Like I almost don't even care who it's for necessarily. I just feel like I can find more upside than what DJ Chark can provide me. Like
I can buy that.
Like unless it's a super deep league, like I don't want to drop DJ Chark, but I want him out of my lineup. And if I have any way, like anyone with any kind of upside, I like there's no way that I'm starting DJ Chark against Chicago. There's no way I'm starting Tyler Lockett against the Rams. Jerry Jeudy going against the Chargers. Like these are all guys that I'm just like, man, slam dunk, get them out of there. Michael Pittman against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, those are guys that we just don't have. We haven't seen the pop really, even honestly, like Jeudy and Pittman. I think Pittman had one big game, but like against Pittsburgh, that's going to be doubtful, right? So, I agree with that. The only one I would maybe question is Lockett because it seems like oftentimes there are DK days or Lockett days, and just based on the matchup. So he's the one guy I might consider keeping in just because if he does have a day, it's going to be a big one. Typically, it's just because he's kind of more of a hot or cold guy, at least from my viewpoint. I might be wrong.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It's kind of been a while since we've gotten much from him, but
that's true.
I mean, we know that it's there. Like he had that monster game against Arizona.
Yep.
I think it was either 3 or 4 touchdowns, but I mean, I guess the upside is still there, and especially you got to assume that Ramsey is on DK Metcalf, so the softer coverage, Marcus Peters, I guess, would be on Lockett. So,
and he's not really a cover guy. He's more of like a he's more. I don't know what the other term is. So
yeah. Yeah. You have to provide help for him. So let's see. So I don't know. Like but again, like the rest of those guys, I'm just like I'm like I was having a hard time starting them anyways in championship week, like Robbie Anderson against Washington with, with Moore and Samuel both healthy. But then again, it's a bad matchup. DJ Chark, Jerry Jeudy, like Michael Pittman. Those are guys I was having a hard time starting them anyways. But now when I'm looking at almost 60-point deficit, they're gone. Absolutely gone.
Agreed.
And I will take like anyone with any kind of upside.
Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, for sure. Darnell Mooney. I mean, that might have been a move I was making before all this anyways.
Yeah.
Especially now.
Yeah.
It's a great matchup for the Bears. Against Jacksonville. So, I mean, maybe Danny Amendola against Tampa Bay. Demarcus Robinson is a guy for me. It's a great matchup for Kansas City going against Atlanta. I mean, they're the second worst defense at stopping wide receivers. So, it's tough because there are so many different ways that Pat Mahomes can go with the ball. But Demarcus Robinson has pretty consistently been one of his top targets when you get down around the red zone. You're generally looking for, you're generally looking for Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, going deep to those guys, trying to get them alone in space. But once you get down inside the red zone, like those guys are almost invisible. You're looking for the big body guys. And Demarcus Robinson is a guy for me who at least has that multiple touchdown upside that could make up that difference.
Yep. Him or Sammy, like either of those guys, because we just don't, that offense, that's a perfect offense to add to that to a lineup like that, because there is that true ceiling that most wide receivers don't have. So, that's a perfect, it's like literally like the sweet spot, right? Like you got a horrible defense, you got the best offense we've probably ever seen, best quarterback, all that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, getting that third or fourth option, even Mecole can be in that. I mean, I'm sure everybody's going to put Mecole in regardless because they're in that situation, because he's an obvious upside play. But those other guys are definitely worth starting over some of those guys that you just don't have any faith in. And, maybe you get 0 from those guys that you play from the KC wide receiver corps, but they have 20-point upside.
Mm-hmm.
So, I like that call.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, just guys like that, guys in that range, I think. And you brought up Deshaun Jackson, and now all of a sudden he's trending on Twitter. I give you full credit for that one.
I probably pulled it from Twitter, so yeah, thank you.
Oh, I thought you got it trending.
Maybe
with this podcast that literally everybody on earth is obviously listening to right now.
That's right.
My Periscope counter is just broken.
It says 0.
Yeah, it says 0 because it can't count that high. Like It doesn't get into the trillion.
Infinity equals 0.
Yeah. Yeah. So they just kind of they just reset it at 0. Just said,
for you old people, it's a Y2K issue.
Yeah. Yeah. So 0 just means all.
Yes.
In this case. All right. Let's get out of here. I mean, I think that that really kind of sums it up. Like this is doable. This is not easy, but this is doable. Yeah. Don't give it up just yet, but definitely, like you said, I mean, just get your hands on the controls and don't leave it until this week is over. Keep making the moves
every game.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't like making roster changes or lineup changes Typically I don't like to make lineup changes once games have started. They usually backfire on me. But my God, if I'm if I'm trying to make up a 60-point deficit, like there's no way in hell that I'm gonna just like sit back and hope for the best,
Right. And you might let's say you have Scotty Miller and you put him in, right? Because he's like a deep threat. And Scotty Miller scores 2 touchdowns and has 120 yards. Maybe you don't put another super aggressive guy in the 4:30 game, or maybe you do. It's just keep evaluating. Like, put in the work. That's why we're here, and that's why it's fun. Like, enjoy this weekend, even if you get smashed.
Yeah, that especially. Yeah, and silver medal's still good, but man, like the story that comes with the championship. If you go beat the team with Alvin Kamara,
oh my God. Yeah,
you guide that team to a championship. Man,
I can't wait to hear those stories because they're going to come out on Tuesday too.
Yes, and we would love to hear them. We can't wait. Yeah, even if you just are able to overcome that deficit, even if you end up losing, but you make it close.
Yeah,
make them sweat.
Yeah,
we want to hear those stories too,
for sure.
So yeah, keep us posted. Let's get out of here.
Sounds good. Good luck, everyone.
At SuperDuperFlex on Twitter. I'm at SuperFlex, dude. Stick with us on Superflex City. Subscribe if you haven't already. Follow us at Superflex City. And yeah, go get those championships.